And we finally have a deal. Hello guys, it's Cordy here, and wow, it's officially done. After weeks of intense discussions, speculation, and behind-the-scenes negotiations, the big news has finally dropped. Just a few hours ago, it became official that the WNBA and the WBPA have reportedly reached a verbal agreement on the terms of a brand new collective bargaining agreement. This is a massive moment for the league and a clear signal that the future of women's basketball is moving in a powerful direction. One of the biggest headlines coming out of this deal is something we've never seen before in league history. Player salaries will now be directly tied to revenue growth. That alone is game-changing. It means that as the league continues to grow, through increased viewership, sponsorships, and global attention, the players will directly benefit financially. There are even early expectations that this could eventually lead to players earning salaries as high as $1 million, which would mark a historic shift in the economics of the sport. Now, to be fair, this development didn't come completely out of nowhere. Many insiders and fans had a feeling that something like this was on the horizon, especially with the recent surge in popularity around the league. Still, seeing it actually happen is a huge milestone. Commissioner Cathy Engelbert described the deal as transformational, emphasizing that it will help create a system where everyone involved, players, teams, and the league itself, gets what they deserve and more. She also highlighted how excited everyone is to move forward and share this progress with fans, especially knowing that the future of the league is being built on a stronger and more balanced foundation. Another major takeaway from these negotiations is that, despite how long and complex they were, they didn't disrupt the league's timeline. That's a huge relief across the board. Engelbert confirmed that the extended discussions had no impact on the 2026 season schedule, meaning everything is still on track exactly as planned. Training camp is set to open on April 19th, giving teams the opportunity to prepare, evaluate talent, and build chemistry heading into the season. From there, preseason games will begin on April 25th, offering fans their first look at new rosters, off-season moves, and emerging storylines. Then, on May 8th, the regular season will officially tip off, marking the beginning of another exciting chapter for the WNBA and its rapidly growing global audience. As more details continue to emerge, reports, like the one from Alexa Philippou, suggest that this agreement represents a significant step forward in terms of player empowerment. According to early insights, progress was made on multiple fronts to ensure that players have a stronger voice and a more meaningful stake in the league's success. Engelbert even pointed out that the timing of the breakthrough, reportedly around 3 a.m., felt symbolic, reflecting just how hard both sides worked to reach common ground. At its core, this deal is about player empowerment. The players came into negotiations standing firm, making it clear that their collective voice matters, and in the end, that unity appears to have paid off. That said, not every detail of the agreement has been made public just yet. Both sides have chosen not to share the full specifics, as the formal term sheet still needs to be finalized. On top of that, the agreement is still pending ratification by both the players and the league's board of governors. So while this is a major breakthrough, there are still a few final steps before everything becomes official. Naturally, that leaves room for speculation. If we're being realistic, it's possible that the players secured somewhere in the range of around 20% of gross revenue, high enough to represent meaningful progress, but still within a range that the league feels comfortable sustaining long-term. That kind of middle ground is typically how these negotiations play out, and it wouldn't be surprising if that's where things landed. But just imagine for a second how different this could have gone. Imagine if the Board of Governors had simply rejected the proposal outright, or if the players had decided the terms weren't good enough and walked away. That scenario could have led to serious chaos, delays, uncertainty, and potentially even disruptions to the season. Instead, both sides found a way to come together, compromise, and move the league forward. And that's what makes this moment so important. It's not just about the numbers or the contract terms, it's about progress, unity, and the continued growth of the game. For a basketball fan, this is one of those moments that really shows how far the league has come and how much potential still lies ahead. The WNBA isn't just growing, it's evolving, and this new CBA could be the foundation for an even bigger and brighter future now. When you really sit back and look at the situation from a realistic perspective, it's hard to imagine the players pushing back against their own union representatives at this stage of the process. At the end of the day, the WBPA exists for one core reason: to represent the collective interests of every player in the WNBA. These union leaders are the ones sitting in the rooms, going through every clause, every percentage point, every financial structure, and every long-term implication. They're not just negotiating for the stars of the league, but for every single player, from rookies trying to find their footing to veterans who have helped build the foundation of the league over the years. So if those representatives come back and say, "This is the best deal we could secure," most players are naturally going to trust that process. That trust is built over time, through experience, through transparency, and through the understanding that negotiations at this level are never simple or straightforward. Because of that, the likelihood of players themselves rejecting the agreement feels extremely low. It's not impossible, but it would definitely be surprising. Typically, once a deal reaches this stage, where both sides have spent countless hours negotiating, compromising, and refining the terms, it means that there's already a level of mutual understanding in place. Players understand that not every demand can be met fully, just like the league understands that progress has to be made to keep up with the growth and momentum of the sport. So, what you usually end up with is a middle ground. Not perfect for either side, but acceptable for both. And in most cases, that's enough to get the deal across the finish line. But let's be honest for a moment, the funniest possible outcome in all of this would have been something completely unexpected, almost ironic in nature. Imagine this scenario: after all the long nights, the intense discussions, the back-and-forth debates, the strategic positioning, and maybe even a few heated arguments behind closed doors, the final agreement ends up looking almost identical to what the league originally proposed at the very beginning. Just think about that for a second. Hours upon hours, maybe even over 100 hours spent in negotiation rooms, analyzing numbers, breaking down revenue models, and pushing for changes, only to circle right back to square one. Picture it like this: the maximum salary eventually reaches that headline-grabbing $1 million mark, which sounds incredible on the surface and would absolutely be a historic milestone for the league. But then you look deeper into the structure and you see something like a 15% share of gross revenue, paired with maybe a 70% share of net revenue, depending on how the final framework is constructed. If that were the case, it would almost feel surreal. Not necessarily in a negative way, but in a way that makes you step back and laugh a little. Because it would essentially mean that despite all the effort, all the negotiation tactics, and all the strategic maneuvering, the end result didn't shift as dramatically as many people might have expected. And honestly, there's something kind of fascinating about that possibility. Negotiations, especially in professional sports, aren't always about completely transforming the landscape overnight. Sometimes they're about reinforcing certain structures while making incremental improvements. So even if the final numbers ended up being close to the league's original vision, the process itself still matters. The players still asserted their voice. The union still demonstrated its power. And the league still had to engage in meaningful dialogue rather than simply dictating terms. That in itself is a form of progress, even if the outcome looks similar on paper. Still, you can't help but imagine how people would react if that scenario actually played out. Fans would be debating it nonstop. Analysts would be breaking it down from every possible angle. Some would argue that the players should have pushed harder, while others would point out that stability and long-term growth are just as important as immediate gains. It would spark conversations about what winning a negotiation really looks like. Is it about getting the highest possible percentage? Is it about securing long-term financial security? Or is it about establishing a framework that allows the league to grow sustainably while ensuring players benefit along the way? Those are the kinds of questions that would dominate the conversation. But beyond all of that speculation, all of those hypothetical scenarios, and all of the what-if discussions, the most important takeaway from this entire situation is actually very simple. There is going to be a season. And that matters more than anything else right now. With Cathy Engelbert confirming that everything is still on track, it brings a sense of stability and excitement not just to the players and teams, but to the fans as well. The schedule remains intact. The off-season timeline hasn't been disrupted, and the league can continue building on the incredible momentum it has generated over the past few years. And when you look at the calendar, the timing of all this couldn't be more intense. We're heading into one of the busiest and most exciting stretches in women's basketball. Right now, all eyes are on the NCAA Division I Women's Basketball Tournament, which is approaching its final stages. This is always one of the most thrilling times of the year, with the Final Four and the national championship game delivering some of the most memorable moments in the sport. It's where stars are made, where legacies are built, and where the next generation of talent begins to capture the attention of fans around the world. Once that tournament wraps up, typically around early April, with the championship game falling around April 5th or 6th, that's when things really start to accelerate on the professional side. The WNBA off-season doesn't ease in slowly. It hits the ground running. One of the first major events expected to follow is the expansion draft, which could play a huge role in shaping the future of the league. Expansion always brings a unique level of excitement because it introduces new teams, new markets, and new opportunities for players. But it also creates difficult decisions for existing franchises. Right after the expansion draft, free agency is expected to open almost immediately. And that's when everything starts happening all at once. Within a matter of days, or even hours, you could see a wave of roster moves, signings, trades, and strategic adjustments. Teams will be looking to strengthen their lineups, address weaknesses, and position themselves as contenders for the upcoming season. For players, it's a time filled with both opportunity and uncertainty. Some will secure major contracts. Others will be searching for the right fit. And for fans, it's one of the most exciting parts of the year because every move has the potential to shift the balance of power across the league. One of the biggest questions looming over this entire process revolves around the expansion draft and how teams will approach it. Specifically, how many players each team will be allowed to protect. Early rumors suggest that the number could be around 5 players per team. If that turns out to be true, it's going to create some incredibly tough decisions for every franchise in the league. Because when you really think about it, most teams have more than 5 players they would ideally like to keep. Narrowing that down forces teams to evaluate not just talent, but also potential, fit, contracts, and long-term strategy. Take the Indiana Fever as an example. They're a team that has been building around young talent while also trying to establish a competitive identity. If they're only allowed to protect 5 players, who do they choose? Do they prioritize star power? Do they focus on young players with high upside? Do they look at positional needs? Or do they make decisions based on chemistry and team dynamics? These are the kinds of questions that front offices are going to be wrestling with in the coming weeks. And it's not just the Fever. Every single team across the league will be facing similar dilemmas. Contending teams will have to decide whether to protect veteran players who contribute immediately or younger players who represent the future. Rebuilding teams will have to weigh the value of potential versus proven production. And expansion teams will be watching closely, looking for opportunities to build competitive rosters by selecting players who might be undervalued or overlooked. All of this is happening in a very short window of time, which only adds to the intensity of the situation. There's no long break between events. No extended period to sit back and analyze every possible outcome. Decisions will have to be made quickly, and those decisions will have long-term consequences. That's what makes this period so fascinating. It's unpredictable. It's fast-paced. And it has the potential to reshape the entire league. For basketball fan, this is exactly the kind of moment that highlights why the WNBA is becoming one of the most exciting leagues to follow. It's not just about what happens on the court, although that's obviously a huge part of it. It's also about the business side, the strategy, the negotiations, and the constant evolution of the league. From historic collective bargaining agreements to high-stakes roster decisions, everything is interconnected. And right now, all of those elements are coming together at once. As we move forward, the focus will gradually shift from negotiations to competition, from boardrooms to basketball courts. But the impact of this new CBA will continue to shape the league for years to come. It will influence how teams are built, how players are compensated, and how the league positions itself in the global sports landscape. And if the growth continues at the pace we've been seeing, this could just be the beginning of an entirely new era for women's basketball. So while there may still be questions about the exact details of the deal, and while there may be debates about whether it went far enough, one thing is clear: the WNBA is moving forward. The season is coming. The stakes are rising. And the future has never looked brighter. When you start breaking down how teams might approach the expansion draft, especially if the rule ends up allowing only 5 protected players, things get really interesting really fast. For a team like the Indiana Fever, the obvious names practically pick themselves at first glance. You're looking at cornerstone players like Caitlin Clark, who represents not just the present but the future of the franchise, alongside a proven scorer like Kelsey Mitchell. Then you have Aaliyah Boston anchoring the front court, bringing both stability and star power, while Lexi Hull adds value as a versatile, high-energy contributor who fits into multiple lineups. That's already 4 spots that feel almost locked in without much debate. The 5th spot, however, is where things start to get complicated. That's where teams really have to think carefully about roster balance, depth, and long-term planning. Someone like Christy Wallace could be in that conversation, or it could go to another rotational piece, depending on how the coaching staff and front office evaluate their overall system and future needs. But just when you think you've got it figured out, there's another layer to this whole situation that could completely change everything. In some leagues, teams are not allowed to protect restricted free agents during expansion drafts. It's a rule that has been discussed and debated even in leagues like the NBA, and if a similar structure is applied here, it could have massive implications. Suddenly, players that teams technically still have some level of control over could become vulnerable. That changes the strategy entirely. Instead of simply protecting your best 5 players, you now have to consider contract situations, timing, and the risk of losing someone you thought would remain part of your core moving forward. This is where things could get messy very quickly. Across the league, there are a lot of players approaching free agency, and that alone introduces a level of uncertainty. But combine that with expansion draft rules that might limit who can be protected, and you're looking at a scenario where teams could unexpectedly lose key contributors. Players who might have been seen as safe due to their contract status could suddenly be on the move. Others who are more on the fringes of the rotation could become valuable targets for expansion teams looking to build competitive rosters. It creates this unpredictable environment where every decision carries extra weight, and every team has to be prepared for outcomes they might not have initially anticipated. At the same time, this unpredictability is part of what makes the whole process so fascinating. Expansion drafts aren't just about filling out rosters for new teams, they're about reshaping the entire league. They force existing teams to make tough choices, and those choices can have ripple effects that last for years. One decision, who to protect, who to leave exposed, can alter the trajectory of a franchise. And when you multiply that across every team in the league, you start to see just how impactful this moment really is. Despite all the complexity, all the speculation, and all the potential for chaos, there's one simple truth that stands above everything else: there is going to be basketball. And honestly, that's the biggest win of all. After all the uncertainty surrounding negotiations, after all the discussions about revenue splits, contract structures, and whether or not a deal would even get done in time, we finally have clarity. With Cathy Engelbert confirming that the season is moving forward as planned, there's a sense of relief that you can't really overstate. The schedule is intact. The timeline is set. The game goes on. And yeah, maybe the excitement doesn't come across at full energy right now, because let's be real, following all of this has been exhausting. The constant updates, the back-and-forth reports, the speculation about who is holding things up and what the final deal would look like, it takes a toll. There's only so many times you can break down negotiation details before you start craving actual basketball again. Games. Highlights. Performances. Real storylines that unfold on the court instead of in meeting rooms. That's what fans are really here for, and now we're finally getting back to that. Because when you think about it, that's what makes the WNBA special. It's not just the business side or the growth metrics, it's the competition. It's the moments that happen during games. It's the rivalries, the breakout performances, the clutch shots, and the narratives that develop over the course of a season. And after spending so much time focused on contracts and negotiations, getting back to that feels refreshing. It feels like a reset. At the same time, it's important to recognize the effort that went into getting to this point. Players like Brianna Turner and many others across the league played a role in pushing these negotiations forward. These weren't easy discussions. They required time, patience, and a willingness to stand firm on key issues. The players had to advocate for themselves, for their value, and for the future of the league. And in the end, they helped bring everything across the finish line. Now, instead of constantly asking questions like, which side is stalling, or is there going to be a season, we have answers. The uncertainty is gone. The focus can shift. And that shift is exactly what everyone has been waiting for. Teams can start preparing. Players can focus on training and competition. Fans can start looking ahead to matchups, storylines, and everything that makes the season exciting. For basketball fan, this moment feels like a turning point. It's the transition from uncertainty to anticipation, from negotiation talk to basketball talk. And that's where the real fun begins. Because once the season tips off, everything changes. The narratives start writing themselves. New stars emerge. Established players elevate their games. Teams surprise people. Others fall short. And through it all, there's a constant flow of moments that give fans something to talk about, debate, and get excited over. So yeah, in the grand scheme of things, there are still questions about the exact details of the deal. There are still scenarios to analyze when it comes to expansion drafts and roster decisions. But none of that takes away from the biggest piece of news. The game is back. The season is happening. And after everything that's gone on, that really is the best possible outcome. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think about the potential expansion draft decisions? Who would you protect if you were running a team like the Indiana Fever? And how do you feel about the new CBA overall? Drop your thoughts, and if you're rocking with Basketball Fan, don't forget to like and subscribe because we're officially back to real basketball content.